Hello and welcome to PocketWatch, the show where we deep dive and break down some of the best and worst film and TV available in the multiverse. My name is Gus, and today on the show we're swapping out our prisoners' jumpsuits for far more formal attire, but some would say equally oppressive, as we head back to the TVA in the second episode of Marvel's Loki. As usual, I'm not alone. I'm joined by a couple of co-hosts who will help me break down and pull apart the episode. First of all, he's a streetwise Hercules who's here to fight the rising odds. It's Peter Burns.
Thank you. And I haven't seen Disney's Hercules, so I assume that's a nice reference.
That's not what the reference was at all, but all right, we'll just move on from that. And with him as well, a fan of foreshadowing plot devices and obnoxious and recreational seacraft, Nick Richardson.
I want one of those water jetpacks. and in the future, I will have one.
Totally will.
Will you be reading a magazine about them, though, like exclusively dedicated to them?
That's all I do with my free time.
Fair enough. As usual, this is a full spoiler breakdown of episode 2 of Loki, the TV series. So we're going to go into full spoilers. We'll take a bit of a temperature check from everyone, and then we'll break it down scene by scene and see what we thought. This episode was called The Variant because it focused very heavily on the antagonistic character of the Variant, the mysterious hooded cloaked figure from the first episode. And the synopsis puts it that Mobius has set Loki to work investigating the Variant, but not everyone at the TVA is thrilled to work alongside the God of Mischief, which, I mean, makes a lot of sense. If you were suddenly slapped with an office partner and they're like, oh, he was the previous God of Mischief, I'm sure you're looking at a kind of Office scenario, and I'm referring, of course, to the other TV show.
The Office.
The show called The Office, of course.
I think you were,
okay, just wanted to clarify.
Referring to the scenario on HBO.
So, of course, we see Loki then set off with Mobius and team up in a sort of duo detective role, which we'll get into. But first of all, guys, after the opening of episode 1, the reintroduction of Loki, I should say, and now settling quite comfortably into his role at the TVA, what did we think of the episode overall? And then we'll go into more detail. Peter?
I didn't love this episode. I thought the pacing was a little off. None of the humor really landed for me, and then it was over.
So cold, generally, if we're going
pretty
with the
cold. Pretty cold.
All right, Nick, did it warm you up at all, or were you equally as chilly on this one?
The exact opposite. This is
good.
one of my favorite episodes of Marvel TV they've ever made.
Excellent.
I thought this was everything that I wanted this show to be, and it felt like the first episode was season 1 and this was season 2. It was such they jumped so hard into really big things straight away that I just love this. The humor landed for me.
Yep.
What a good.
I'll echo Nick's temperature there as well and say, like, I was really happy that this took some, I think, bolder steps. It jumped a lot further forward than I was expecting, considering I thought this was going to be dragged out. I felt the first episode was a little slower, a little more plotting, and I was happy with how quickly they moved on into the main crux of the story, which we will now get into because we'll do a quick scene-by-scene breakdown, starting, obviously, with the first scene where we begin in Wisconsin, of all places, in 1985, the year of the birth of our Lord Gus Ronald, which is my year of birth. So I was very happy to see that date flash up on screen. And we arrive at a medieval fair where the Minutemen have just turned up to look for the latest, I'm going to say, like, spike in time variants. I think that sounds about right, what they said. Still on the trail of Loki 2.0. We'll come up with a better name for it, I'm sure, who is causing all sorts of havoc by stealing the charges, the reset charges, and murdering Minutemen. So still hot on the feet of that character. They arrive there.
The superior Loki is
Superior Loki
title to run with for this.
Well, that's how they refer to it later on. So we'll do that for now. And after arriving there, I just want to note that opening line from the woman at the fair who says, "You're not dressed appropriately," and then as they walk off, her little throwaway line of, "Some of us need this."
Yeah,
with such a delightful start into some of the comedy we see later on that I really enjoyed.
Maybe it's not her. It's hard to tell. That woman, I thought that woman was Megan Amram. The comedian, and she's a writer on The Good Place. It may not have been her, but maybe it just looks like her. Anyway.
Sounded like something that would come from that
That's
kind
a
of
Good
humor
Place
as well.
kind of joke.
Yes,
yeah, totally.
It's totally just like it's like a comedy writer. Like the showrunner is a Rick and Morty writer, comedy writer friends. It seems like comedy writer style cameo. But anyway, I'll find out later.
Yeah. And a lot of that humor in this episode was these like little, like sort of quirky human lines on the tail end of bigger speeches and stuff like that. So a nice little setup there. They head into the tent where they find out it's a trap because a recording starts playing. And then we have the superior Loki has set a trap for them, uses a little bit of mind enchantment, turns all the Minutemen on each other. And there's a little opening action scene where they all fight each other to the soundtrack, holding out for a hero, which I thought was very underwhelming, considering how much that song has like become notorious as like a bit of a meme song. It's been played under like less than heroic actions as a cool, like really exciting moment, or sometimes like a really cool moment in like gaming or something. I thought that was kind of a strange music choice. What do you guys think?
It's Shrek.
I think it was.
It's from Shrek. That's the only thing I know that song from is Shrek.
It's used well in Shrek, and the version there is I think Bonnie Tyler did the original. I might be wrong.
Tyler, yeah.
But then that was the original one.
It's definitely this is part of the problem I have with the whole show to me, which it all feels very small. Like everything is in a tiny room, and this fight had no expansiveness at all. The action was fine, like the cutting of the action was fine, but the fight didn't go anywhere. It wasn't interesting. It was just like, the superior Loki is just like ducking back into the shadows and then reappearing when it's convenient. Yeah, just ducking out of the camera shot, not hiding in the space. It's like just like an editing thing as opposed to an interesting dynamic fight.
And the same thing with
they let the music do the heavy lifting, which was kind of working for me at the start until I realized this fight isn't going anywhere.
And I would say, like, again, an obscure music choice. You either go with something that totally juxtaposes the scene you're in, like you choose a really happy-go-lucky fair tune as people are getting like smacked around, and you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. Or you choose a song that is perfectly like lyric for action, like sort of parroting what's happening there. And it didn't do that at all. I was kind of like, oh, this song is for when like someone who you unexpectedly could be a hero steps up into that role. And I'm like, this is just weird. So it's just kind of like, oh, here's a song you recognize at the start. We shouldn't get hung up on it, but it was a weird thing to start the episode on. And I was like, this is going to be weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just a bit underwhelming. It was definitely like the weakest scene in the show. And Pete, I think that's a good point that it did feel small. And it's funny when you do something like that, when you do this kind of like, there's a fight in just one room, it doesn't need to feel small if you do cool choreography. If it's a cool fight, then you go, oh, this was awesome. Yeah. Like, I don't need this to break out into like 12 different locations. But yeah, it was kind of neither. And it really felt like someone just like walking around easily outplaying these people who are supposed to be total professional soldiers, basically. And yet to be totally terrible song choice. It's the one resounding thing from this episode.
Yet to be impressed by the Minutemen. They kind of still feel like goons, like stormtroopers running around. Yeah, and in this case, the end result was one of the Minutemen actually gets kidnapped, captured by the superior Loki, which hasn't happened as yet. They've just been murdered up until this point. So that's the end of the opening scene that takes us back to the TVA, where we do a bit of a jump, I think, just in terms of like plot and character development. And we meet Loki is now fully dressed in the aforementioned formal, like, office attire and is just hanging out in the bullpen, who's clearly there's been a bit of a deal that was hinted at in the previous episode by Owen Wilson's character Mobius saying that like, hey, maybe you should work for us. He's just clearly dived straight on into that, and he's there doing some like basic paperwork or just following instructional videos by Miss Minute, and we catch him with his feet up on the desk reading the magazine about jet skis. So this was probably the other biggest kind of logic leap for me, which is like, oh, wow, they really wanted to move the story forward here because then we play catch up from here on out. I think it was a good move. I think it was nice to start like that and be like, let's not have him try and get introduced to this whole setup any more than we already have.
I'm going to agree with you before Peter disagrees with us. And
Good.
I really liked
the office was too small, says Peter.
No, I think you're right. Like that was a good fast track.
Yeah. It just totally made sense. I was so happy that was what they decided to do, particularly after episode 1, where I felt like we were just treading water for so long. That this was a great jump. I love him in that jacket. He puts that jacket on and pops that collar, and he's just like, God damn, that man can wear clothing. Just as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, I'm good that this is now like, because this is the tone of the show now, that he is. Yes. He's an employee, and particularly in that first episode, not only reworking the idea of him being evil to bringing him to the Loki that we know, but also reworking him from being an all-powerful god to actually, you're kind of like on the god scale, you're relatively low. Like the TVA deal with much bigger issues than you quite routinely, it appears. So the fact that he's now just literally an employee is that knocking him off the pedestal that I liked that they did that early.
And there's some interesting sort of power shifts with Loki as well, in the sense that, like, he's now an office lackey, but then in the next briefing scene where they're basically saying, hey, here are all the variants that we've run into or that we've encountered of other Lokis, and we've got a great little look at these sort of like holograms of other universes. And yeah, we've got like Hulk Loki, we've got like original design old Norse god Loki. I think we've got like Tour de France Loki in there as well.
Yeah, there was like a Lance Armstrong Photoshop.
If anyone's mischievous, it's Lance Armstrong Hall. So that was fun, because also the whole time that's happening, you've got Loki in the background kind of like being confronted by this thing, which is really normal to them, and suddenly realizing there's all these other versions of him. And the ego just gets absolutely played around with in this episode, because you've got him realizing there's other versions of him. He might not be the best version of himself. They're all experts on him. Mobius then sort of talks about, like, later on how much he knows about him. And it really messes with, I think, our version of Loki, as he's kind of playing catch up to this agency who's like, yeah, we know what we're doing. We know how to sort of like, we're on the trail for you, that kind of thing. Until he then gets to kind of like school them on some of his powers. He has a little monologue about like the difference between, I think it's like replicating and mirroring, and realizes how much he knows about himself. And that just, again, boosts his ego. So it's a fun little roller coaster he's on, I think, and might continue to be on.
With the multiple variants of Loki, the interesting thing about what they did there is that they showed basically just Tom Hiddleston photoshops. So photoshops of Loki, but the reveal at the end of the episode, if it is what that we're presented it is that's a Loki that is completely different. It's not a Tom Hiddleston. It's it's a woman, and and it's not necessarily like shape shifting potentially. So they kind of like hide that by going, oh, you've always looked the same. It's just like you took a different path. But then at the end of the episode, they're implying, well, maybe there's different people out there who are Loki as well,
under the title of a Loki as well. So yeah. Obviously the end reveal there of Lady Loki, which is long rumored to be a part of this show. But for now, they set off and they head back to that fairground, and we're back to the little tent that Pete hates. While they head in there, and basically Loki gets to play. Was anyone getting like True Detective vibes from this? I got some kind of like just.
That's a very generous thing to throw away.
I would say mainly
it's definitely a cop procedural vibe they're going for.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And just some of those sort of like the way it's shot, and these two like trench coat cops heading on in, and sort of like one walking in, having that moment of like the savant going like, "Hang on, I know what happened here," sort of thing. Like it looked a lot darker than I remembered the show actually was. I was like, oh yeah, right. They're just in here like chasing another mischievous god through like time portals. But they head back in there, and we get the scene where Loki essentially tries to throw Mobius and the team off by kind of telling them it's a trap and that maybe they're all going to get killed. What did you guys take from this? Because I'm still a bit confused about this scene. Like, what was his end goal from doing this, do you think? You're both just as confused.
Well, no, I think he's still just figuring out what to do. I think he's still trying to get away. Like, he might be living there.
Sure.
He might be an employee, but it's only because they take away his powers when he's in the TVA. And so I think he's just like anything, basically like that character, anything he can do to get the upper hand on anybody, then he will take. And he's still trying to figure out what his master plan is in this scenario. It was
just like I understand, like I like that for the character to be like looking for the way out, but the logic of that is so flawed in that it's like in 30 seconds either way I'm going to be revealed as a liar.
Yeah.
And Owen Wilson calls him out because Owen Wilson is good at reading people. And I like that about that character as well. But it was like, this is just the stupidest lie. You're going to be caught, you're going to be found out on this lie immediately. And it's like, you're the god of lying, and like, this is the lie that you have.
Well, I mean,
just
the
so
God of
pathetic. It's
Mischief
just so
implies
pathetic.
that he just does things for the sake of them to cause trouble and then never really thinks of the repercussions. So it's like, I guess it plays into
He's gonna get killed if he fucks around. It's like there's no gravity to anything. It's like, all right, whatever. It's just a bad bit to me.
Yeah, like
it didn't play well.
certainly. Yeah, I certainly don't think it was necessarily the best version of what that is, because I think that's a good point of going that, as soon as they walk outside and they're not killed, it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah,
you were lying,
or they leave and take him with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from history, he always makes it up as he goes, so it would have been the starting off of then having to ad-lib his way out of whatever scenario he finds himself in. But you're right, after we've done some groundwork in the previous episode to show that he is actually fearful of the TVA, he does fear for his life, and he wants to do good by them, even if it's in a tricksty kind of way. Like, that idea of just trying to go, oh, I'm back in the real world, let me try just to backstab everyone instantly feels a bit pointless.
It was played as clever, and Tom Hiddleston sold that piece of writing, but the idea itself wasn't clever.
Yeah.
So it's like, for the story, it makes sense that he's still trying to work out how to get away from this, but and Tom Hiddleston acted the shit out of it, and it still just was like just a logical fallacy to me watching it happen. I'm like, okay, what?
Yeah.
It could have been, if it was something else. It's perfect for his arc in this episode as well, where we see him fall more in line with what the TVA and enjoy that process a bit more, and kind of like fall in line with them a bit more.
No, I guess you're right. In terms of for character development, didn't really work. It was a bit of a misstep. But for the episode's progression, it kind of plays into the fact that we get to see Mobius has the upper hand. He can call Loki on his bullshit. And then that sort of means that little attempt to find out some more information was kind of a botched job when they went back to the medieval fair, because then we return back to the TVA and Mobius has to report back to Judge Ravonna Lexus Renslayer, who we met previously, as kind of the it's a character from the Marvel comics. I'm not as familiar with her, but like I think I don't know if she's always played a part in the TVA and the Loki storyline, but a great little way to put that character in there. And who we met previously is kind of like the authoritative figure at the TVA, who is basically the gatekeeper to the timekeepers. That's confusing, and that he has to report back to her as his boss, and she's a bit upset that basically she thinks he's gone rogue with this our version of Loki, I guess we should call him, and that he's not getting enough information. To which Owen Wilson kind of like plays back into the hand of like, oh no, I'm getting information from him. Like even his mistakes are revealing things that we should know about the superior Loki. And that's a nice little scene of him in there. Just basically, it could have been played more ham-fisted with the like, damn it, you're not getting the results we want, and I want your badge and all that kind of stuff. So it was nice to have it softer, I guess. This
was my favorite scene in the app. Like, okay. I love the dynamic of Ravonna, and I think Owen Wilson is so good in this. He just is so comfortable. Yeah, that's odd to me that he's so perfect in this like fantasy thing, because he's so separated from it.
He's so normal.
His performance is just not buying into any of the fantasy of it. He's just so grounded. And I really, really like how he interacts with Ravonna. I think he's really charming, sweet. I think she's a really cool character, and I'm excited to see how powerful she actually is. And like even just down to like the he's leaving rings on her wooden furniture and stuff. It's like there's just something so like that was good world building to me that these
and I love that
exist together for a long time.
There are already rings here. She's like, you put them there. Like, that was you. Stop it. This relationship is fantastic. We saw a taste of it in that first episode. I thought there was some really interesting stuff in here as well. The idea, he has a weird thing about, I don't know whether or not it's flirting or something else, about being her favorite or being her only sort of like investigator, analyst guy. Like he brings it up multiple times in this scene about being, you've got other people working for you. Like, I'm your favorite, that sort of thing.
Who gave you this relic? Was it your favorite or someone else? Like, I don't remember giving you that one.
Come back. Like, there's no way. Whatever that, like, the high school pen is, it's definitely coming out. The Roosevelt high school pen is definitely going to trigger something in a future episode. But I don't know whether or not that was just like flirting, or if there's some other thing going on there. I have seen a theory out there that Mobius is a Loki, and and this is part of like he has infiltrated the TVA. He's a Loki who looks not like Tom Hiddleston. He's a different looking Loki. And there are some reasons why that might hold up and might not. But so there is some sort of like he just seems to be probing a lot of information there. The other thing that I thought was really interesting in this scene is like, there is no way that the Timekeepers are not evil. Or at least
they're not. It's that they exist, or that there's a reason they are Wizard of Ozing behind the scene, and there's this grandiose
at the very least self-serving, right? Like
yes,
it's like,
totally.
They're building this ideal timeline, but it's like it's ideal for them, not for anyone else necessarily.
Absolutely. And like they're referring to the sacred timeline and this idea that like it has to play out in the way that we are making sure that it plays out, and the fact that no one else can really meet them. There's just all that sort of stuff where I'm like, there's definitely something else going on there. And I saw a great piece in Vanity Fair overnight where they were writing about how the first stage, or is this phase 3? Yes,
I would have thought even 3 or 4.
Right? Okay, right. Well, the first couple of phases of Marvel was about the military-industrial complex of superheroes. It was all about like S.H.I.E.L.D. and about might and that sort of thing. And then when that stuff collapses, like we're now moving into the magic phase. And that we've seen in a few TV shows and a few of the Marvel films, the institution is revealed to be flawed. Like S.H.I.E.L.D. was infiltrated by Hydra. The end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like the person that you thought was on your side, like spoilers for this show, Sharon is actually the power broker. Like stuff like that. And that this is another one of those scenarios where it's like the TVA could be revealed to be like you said, Pete, at the very least, a self-serving piece of institution. And if that's the case, then is Lady Loki actually a villain, or is she bringing down the TVA? Because so far we've only seen her kill TVA citizens as well. People. Yeah. She's not out killing citizens like normal people. So yeah, I just thought there was tons in this scene of me going, there is definitely way more happening than we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think like whether or not there's something to read into the character of Ravonna as possibly having two-faced about the whole thing, or whether or not, as you said, it's like it's setting up that soft, nice relationship between the two of them, so there is a point of conflict later on when there is something revealed to either be that institution is flawed, is purposely misdirected, and there's, as I said, some conflict as to where your allegiances lie and that kind of thing as well. So I agree with Pete. I think she's a great character, and that relationship works well. And it's nicer than going, as I said, back to that cliche of reporting back to your boss and just like, seeing things we've seen time and time again in those procedural cop dramas. It's like, there's more here. They're a more interesting department than just, you're not mimicking just a cop drama and that kind of thing as well. So that said, Mobius gets one more chance to bring in the superior Loki. And
he's just 3 days from retirement.
So from there, he heads out back into the halls of the TVA, and I actually really liked what happens from here on out in terms of we suddenly see Mobius switch from this like soft, caring, really supportive Loki fan to being like he's storming down, and Loki's playing catch up with him, being like sort of backpedaling, being like, "Hey, look, that was just a bit of a trick, and I know this probably won't run well with you, Pete, because you weren't a fan of how what he was trying to do." But I liked then seeing him try to scramble together and pick up the pieces as he often has to do as the character, because all his plans always fall to the wayside. And he's always sort of like, hey, I'm sorry, it was just a test. And then we get into the fun little moments of like, that was your first lesson in how to catch a Loki. It's like to trick you and all this kind of stuff. It's not as deep as some of the other information, but I found it still like a fun idea that then basically Mobius just tells him to shut up. And he's like, essentially by the end of it, he's like, I can tell you that I'm doing this because I'm being manipulated by, or I'm just going to tell you what you want to hear. As a way to make you do what we need you to do here. So again, it's this up and down ego of like Loki thinking he's got the upper hand, or maybe he's being played as well. And it was nice to just see a little bit of moment where that perfect little duo of Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston's like, oh, they're fighting. They're not friends anymore. I'm maybe reading into it too much, but I thought it was definitely a sort of a chance to see that there's some friction between the two. And so he sends Loki off to the archives, the library, whatever you want to call it, to try and hunt down some evidence as to what is going on with the second variant and where she is hiding. And we get these scenes in the library where he's kind of like mocking the process of having to do all the paperwork, and he doesn't like really being an employee there, which leads to him finding a bit of paperwork that reveals that Asgard itself has been totally destroyed. And I want to stop and just focus on this for a second, because I know you guys didn't feel it as much in the first step, where we got some flashbacks to him seeing his mother passing and some other characters that he had connections with. But man, Tom Hiddleston can like act the fuck out of his eyes, just like being sad eyes. Like, I was totally on board with this. Maybe
CG teardrop in a close up of eyes.
Oh,
like,
so negative, Pete.
But look,
maybe it was the music choice. There was some really nice swells there.
I loved it. I was totally I thought it was just a really nice little bit.
Yeah, and it's just showing that he's human still. Well, not human, but he has, some real emotions under it all.
Yeah, see, like, I think that landed for me better in that first episode, that I was kind of sitting and absorbing as this is the exposition episode and we're going to get into the show next.
Sure.
And it didn't really land for me here. And I can't say exactly why. I think by this point in the episode, Loki was like my least favorite character. Like, I don't know that I'm enjoying. I think the dynamic is right of Loki being theatrical and Mobius being really straight and stoic. But there's just like, and maybe the show at that point is asking you to empathize more with Mobius than Loki. And so when Loki's being annoying, he's just annoying the shit out of me. And like, I'm not enjoying watching the character Loki. So that by the time where he's crying in front of a piece of paper, it's like, just get your shit together. Like, I didn't empathize with him at all. I'm just
I totally feel differently, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
That's totally interesting. I could totally see that perspective. I really loved this. I love this kind of scene in every film that does it well, where it's the like, go to the library, go to the archives, do the research. Like, it's all the President's Men, it's Zodiac, it's that sort of like, I love that. I love that stuff where where someone is slowly trying to find information. I loved his little scene with the librarian where he's like, can I have all the files pertaining to timekeepers? Those are classified. Can I have all the files pertaining to the beginning of time? Those are classified. The end of time? Those are classified. What files can I have? And then he just gets his own files. And I was like, that's really funny to me. There is a little reference as well to Seven in that scene, where the music that's playing when he walks up to her is Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 3 in D major, which is the music that's playing in the scene where Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt are in the library researching the serial killer themselves, or in the archives doing their own thing. But I feel like that scene worked for me, where he finds that number, because I think to me that's more how this emotion actually happens. It's not someone sitting you down and like expositioning your life to you. He's just going through these files and trying to like solve this puzzle, and then he's just hit with this number of the amount of people that have died as a part of what he did, and I feel like that number is actually, I felt that was really powerful, because it's like when you just see it sitting there, you suddenly go, oh, that's, and he's in a library just reading it. Like that takes.
He's also not with anyone else. Like, as you said, it's like not someone else giving him that exposition and him having to, in every scene that like he's with another person, he's always putting up a front. So it's nice that we get these little moments of him being alone. I don't know if you get to spend any time with him alone in the actual film. So it's like any time with him letting his guard down, as I said, like having a little teary to a piece of paper, I liked, because I hadn't seen that, or I had very little of that in the films themselves. It's like nice to just get moments with him alone doing something, or like having a character reveal moment like that. And like you said, Nick,
totally. It's interesting that you point out that like there's a very blatant Seven reference, because I think, again, that was part of what didn't work for me, was this scene felt like it was just referencing better scenes to do this exact thing, and it wasn't Marvel enough.
Sure. I think that's why I liked it the most. I was going to say even the tent scene when they walked in, I said True Detective, but I was thinking there's some Fincher-esque kind of like just the way it's shot and the way the characters are moving around the scene, and then, falling all the way into the library scene as well. I liked that motif. I liked that look to it all, because it isn't as Marvel as we've seen, and it was going stronger on that design aesthetic that we'd seen hinted at in the first episode. But I can see, Pete, how that can still clash with what you're used to, or what you prefer.
It's not what I prefer. I just don't think it was as good as everything it was referencing.
Zodiac
so therefore it just wasn't. So therefore it just was like a bit flat. And because it was flat, it wasn't as impactful, which is a shame. Because like I think all the things this show is trying to do are really right, like are correct. But it's just not landing for me in the same way. And I'm disappointed because you guys are enjoying it in the way that I'm like, that should have felt like this. And it did for you and it didn't for me.
It's funny because, as you said that, Pete, it's like the actual reveal of him working out or having a revelation was far less impactful than your, as you said, your Zodiacs or something where it's like, oh, they really pieced together something cleverly. Whereas here, he just makes the logic leap that due to the apocalypse that happened at Ragnarok, he discovers the loophole that the variant's been using to hide throughout the time stream as a way of covering their tracks at that stage, which is essentially to be hiding next to an apocalypse, I think is the best way to put it. Essentially, if they choose to hang around near a world ending or a large cataclysmic event, anything they do to mess around with it will have their sort of their footsteps wiped over after the event happens.
Although I would just say though, with that. And Pete, I totally take that point. But with those films, it's like that's the point of the entire film. Like the whole film is about like leading up to what the reveal of that twist is or uncovering that information. And this is a stepping stone. The first 15 minutes of episode 2 of like as the first season of a show. So I agree that it probably there are definitely ways it could have been shot more interestingly or put together more interestingly. And Gus, to your point that like the reveal is a bit of a leap, but it's also like I think it's like it's not supposed to be a big thing. It's supposed to be like, oh, this is just the next thing that gets us to the next part of this show. Yeah.
It's just that they're sitting in front of pieces of papers again, like another time in this episode. It's like it's just like the dynamic of the where the show moves seems to just be one step forward, 2 steps back. It's just a little bit off to me.
Okay. Fair.
Well, I mean, Peter, if libraries don't do it for you, let's head to the cafeteria, which is where Loki heads and interrupts Mobius having lunch and using a very clumsy metaphor tries to describe what he's saying by basically that the apocalypses will cover the tracks of the variant. It's a funny little scene where he sort of, ruins his lunch in the process.
I loved that so much.
It's so bad. I thought it was so bad.
That's so funny if he's like, he gets a salad and then it's like the salt. He's like, don't put the salt. Oh, not the pepper as well. And he's just like, I was trying to eat that. And he's just totally fucking it up in this way of like, okay, this is a very clumsy metaphor, but like, you understand what I'm trying to get at.
I think both actors did a very good job with a badly written scene. It's like, so that's such a fucking obvious thing to do. Like it was so obvious that it just was not funny at all. It's like, oh, that's my salad. And it's like, don't do that to my salad. Oh, and it's like, come on, guys.
Sure, but I think it's nice to see, it's nice to see the character of Loki every time. And for me, and I think Nick, you were sharing this, anytime he's having fun as the character or feeling like positive and motivated, just watching Tom Hiddleston play with that kind of joyful glee, like even if the action itself or the scene is written poorly, like I just ate it up. I loved seeing him just getting to have fun with certain scenes rather than just be confused or dour or like all the things that usually those characters or those actors have to do when they're in these new settings and just constantly just be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing catch up. Nice to see him on the front foot, I would say.
I would say maybe that scene needed to be on the move or something like that to make it more interesting to me. But like, because like you can do a cheesy metaphor or whatever, but just like give it something. It's like, but then all the scenes where they're just walking in front of a green screen in that place, and it's like that feels awful as well. Like it's not
it's so
properly,
funny,
and it's like
that was my criticism of all of the first episode is like, do something. Don't just sit here and talk. And in this one, I'm like, oh, I'm fine with you sitting here. I think because what it feels like is like the show is too different. It feels like the show is two different shows. And there is a workplace, not even necessarily comedy, but there's the workplace side, and then there's the like time travel, jumping to different dimensions.
We could go anywhere at any time.
The idea of like he's just in a cafeteria with his salad, and he's like, okay, I'm just going to put this together with what I've got. That's the like, this is the mundane TVA office bullshit, and then the next scene they're in Pompeii, and so I like, to me that works. I also like the thing I like about Loki is that he's a character who's constantly he's really insecure. and it's because of who he is, and he's not actually part of his family and all that sort of stuff. So he's always actually in child mode, and even when he's the supervillain trying to kill everybody, it's like a child trying
He's playing
to
with his toys,
get attention,
get approval. And so I think that that when he's doing this, he's like excited that he's figured something out. I totally think Hiddleston is like channeling toddler energy of like, I'm proud of this. And he says like, the thing I love is to be right. And he's like, and I get that energy of going like, I may be stuck here right now and I may want to do other things, blah, blah, blah. But since I'm here, I'm going to try to figure this out. And when I do figure it out, I really want approval for it, because that's all he wants. The driving motivation of that character is getting love and approval. And so he'll even take it from Owen Wilson when he's like figuring out something that he found in paperwork. So
yeah. And again, I think for me, it's just that like this is a beat that I've seen a million times and a million other things shot, presented better. But I do think the performances of Hiddleston and Owen Wilson are phenomenal.
Yeah.
In every scene, even the scenes I'm not enjoying because of whatever reason, I'm like, these guys are so good at what they're doing. And I think in this scene that I admit I hate is one of the nicest moments between the two of them, and the best moment of Owen Wilson, I think, in the show we've seen so far. He goes, "You literally have stabbed. I've like seen your whole history. You've literally stabbed 50 people in the back 50 times." And he goes, "Well, I wouldn't do it again." And Owen Wilson laughs. And you never see that. You never see someone laughing like a human laugh.
It's so true,
in a Marvel thing, and like it's so nice to see like.
And it's especially as a line that would just be, you're right, as a line that would totally be used as him being like, oh, like for him to laugh. I almost thought it looks blooper-esque, like they just left the camera rolling on that little bit, which was lovely and disarming.
Right? That's the character is so human.
Totally.
It's like that he's allowed to break because he is just a human.
You just never know what you're going to get from the powerhouse actor that is Owen Wilson. He might laugh, he might chuckle, he might smile. Go, wow. He can do anything, any of those four things. But no, it's a lovely little end, because then suddenly Mobius is like, "Yep, I'm on board. Let's check out this theory." They travel to Pompeii, as Nick, you mentioned, and there's this another great little green screen moment where they travel all the way back in time to Pompeii to. I know, I'm with him on this one.
I've seen Doritos ads with better compositing than fucking Disney's Marvel. Loki.
Jesus. All right. Well, we'll move through this one quickly. They get to Pompeii. They test their variant by basically, test their theory by seeing if they can make any variations. Loki then gets a chance, or Tom Hiddleston, I should say, gets a chance to like flex his Latin skills from, I'm presuming, a very private schoolboy background. Jumps up, gives a big
that's
speech.
That's the Oxford training right there.
That totally is. Gives a speech in Latin, causes a bit of chaos, which you would think would start a little fracture off on that time stream that Mobius is monitoring. And nothing's happening because obviously the idea is the volcano will explode and wipe out everyone who was there to see it. So it's this kind of like coverall. Whether or not I'm a fan of this device yet, I'm not too sure. I think it does its job, and it feels like a clever way to be able to move around and be in different places and cover that plot hole device of how everything butterfly.
Of what specifically? Of the
apocalypse hiding next to it kind of theory, because it's like essentially it's a coverall for the butterfly effect, isn't it? It's just like everywhere you go, there will be a change to that fractured timeline, and this is like, hey, if you stay somewhere within the radius of a cataclysmic event. They keep calling it apocalypses, which I assume is like the end of a world, but I think they just mean like large area catastrophes.
Yeah, well, it's in Pompeii, and the world didn't end with Pompeii, so
exactly. Are you sure, Nick?
But I like it. I actually really liked it. I was like, oh, this is a cool idea. In terms of like a time travel story, which there's definitely a million things that will happen in this show that will piss me off because it's time travel, and you cannot ever write a time travel story that doesn't have some sort of like, hang on a second. But this to me, I was like, oh yeah, this tracks. Like, no matter what happens here, because everyone's going to get wiped out, it doesn't matter. Even though, even with this, I could go, well, somewhat like those goats that he let out in Pompeii, it would have died somewhere else in the town, and so therefore would have been discovered somewhere else in the town, and therefore in the future they would have built a little fenced off area around Goat Shrine somewhere else that someone would have come. And there would
oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Be a ripple event from that, but but if you hand wave that away, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a cool way that they've hidden this character, I suppose.
And it's a nice way to think of time in this series as like non-linear, as somewhere you can hide in and move around in, and like it gives them the opportunity, I hope, as they move forward to just like use different time settings as interesting backdrops to cool scenes as they ping pong around, which I'm sure something similar will happen. From Pompeii, they return. Oh yeah. So
just on like, and you know, the next scene kind of goes into it a little bit more. But the idea that this other Loki has been hiding in just pre-apocalypses makes sense. The next scene, they find the Loki at the next one, right? But it's not like that Loki is always there, because they're both moving independently of the timeline, right? Yep. So it's like, it's also just like they just it's another thing of like, they just happen to find him at the
right one. Yep.
The right one as the big event is about to happen. The thing that that this Loki has been working towards for ages is happening tomorrow, or, you know, in the future, but like in their time, like in an hour, go to this one place and they're going to be there. And it's all a bit like convenient, but that's that's fine for a show to move.
And I think it's I will just add, I love the end of that Pompeii scene where he's like, if I was Loki, this is where I would hide, and the volcano ash is rushing towards me, and he just tosses his stick, and then he just does that like Loki smile where he puts his hands out. I love it. I totally agree, Pete, that I was like, hang on a second, how, like, they come up with this theory and then they just find the right apocalypse. I wasn't even sure how they found the right apocalypse. That didn't really track for me, but I think it's because
it was the bubblegum.
It was the kablooey
the French kid, but
it was the bubblegum. I knew that, but I was like, I didn't get how they narrowed it down. It just kind of like, I got the bubblegum thing and I got the apocalypse thing, and then I was like, but how did you pick the right apocalypse with the bubblegum?
Effectively, that bubblegum could have traveled to any apocalypse, right?
Exactly. Yes. So, but I think that in my head, I was still thinking, oh, this is going to be a show where he's hunting down this Loki for episodes and episodes. And at the end of this episode, we're like, no, that's not what the show is. So therefore, it is compressing the expectation of what we think the show is going to be is like different, because the show has now totally compressed time, and I'm like, okay, you're making something different than what I thought you were making.
If we're talking about sort of like changing expectations and where this show could go, I'm sure at no point did we ever think we'd utter the line, essentially that bubblegum could have traveled to any apocalypse, as a sentence. Totally. We are definitely like, Pete, for how critical you're being about some of the scenes and you know, the contrived nature of the shooting and the writing. I'm like, come on, there's still bubblegum used as a plot device to get us to said apocalypse, which in this case is the final standoff scene where they, I mean, that's not before, I think, we skipped over, there's like a scene back at the TVA where Owen Wilson and Loki, we should just say Mobius and Loki, have a little back and forth again, and they kind of question each other's what they believe in and how the TVA works. It's a nice scene, but it doesn't really add too much before having this kind of like, it's the library research, and then the kind of like, let's just turn our brains off before we have the revelation scene. Sorry,
I do love that it is like every location they have, they're like, we need at least 2 scenes shot in this location. Like, we have this, and then later in the episode, you have to come back here. And it happens with the tent. There's 2 tent scenes. There's 2 library scenes. It is
happened in the first episode.
Yeah, the 2 office scenes. Like, it was like every time someone leaves a location, it's like, we are coming back to this location. Don't you worry about that.
Which I guess is why. Oh, sorry, Pete. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and back to like my complaint about everything feeling small. It's okay that a library scene feels small, but Pompeii.
It was a huge library. It was massive.
But
they took an elevator down to it
because they can't, because it's all green screen.
Sure,
like there's not much set there. Pompeii, not much set there. It's like that's fine. It's just like disappointing when I think like One Division did it a bit, but it did feel like there was a town because they moved between sets outdoors. Sure. And Captain America, the Winter Soldier, Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think did a good job of feeling pretty expansive for a TV show as well. So
Yeah.
this has felt the smallest to me. This, I feel the blue and green screen.
Especially
a lot
considering
more.
all these scenes have a window into this fantastical TVA world, or maybe not the TVA, but like, yeah, right, this sort of like matte painting of something wonderful, which is cool. But if you keep coming back to that and you're only at a desk and table every time, I can see what you mean, feel claustrophobic. And also the fact that we are going to travel through time to different places. Are we going to just keep stepping through a
Into
golden
different
door
shopping malls?
Well, I was going to say into more green screen Pompeii's, because the shopping mall I found different. But Nick, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we definitely will. And I think I've just made my peace with that like, yes, Marvel have unlimited money, but they're also like, they're using that money to make like 4 to 5 TV shows a year. And so, and their films. Like, so I'm like, okay, I can see that. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Benedict Cumberbatch is going to go places.
Yes, like in the films.
In his mind.
Obviously. but it is, I think it is one of those situations that like Falcon and the Winter Soldier is substantially set like in the real world. So you can shoot kind of in most places.
Real world locations,
they could build the sets for WandaVision because they know we're using this town over and over again. The fact that we're jumping between different times and different dimensions and stuff is like, there's only so much that we can afford. So
it's just an expectation not met
definitely.
that I think disappointed me in this episode.
But then, opposite to you, Pete, I'm not saying you don't like the look of it and stuff. I really love the TVA. I love that place and everything they add to that set design and set dressing. And like, I'm comfortable coming back there and having glowing orange lamps and cool retro office furniture. Like, I'm not bored of it yet. I can see its reuse and how they have to manage that as a hub for how this series will move forward.
It's
but
definitely a way more interesting hub than the frickin' like outpost of the shield dudes in WandaVision. It's it is a cool design. It has a design. It's not just like
that's true,
blue metal, like military industrial complex stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, moving on to, as you mentioned, the shopping mall in Alabama, it's in like 2050, so it's in the future. It's where the variant is hiding out. It's very maybe contrived, but also convenient that that's where they're going to get the get the jump on the variant. They head there. I love the reveal of this. I love the score swell. I found it really, like, if you go back and listen to it again, it's like a really change in a shift in tone for where they move to. And they arrive at this shopping mall that's owned by one of those tech companies that's been hinted at in a previous Marvel series, a kind of Amazon warehouse, and head on in the middle of a storm, to which we are revealed that Loki has his magic back to use here, and they all split up to find the variant. And this was a proper set. It's a decent sized space, so we got a little bit more like interesting dynamically shot stuff. As the team split up, we had Mobius heads off with a bunch of the Minutemen, and Loki heads off with Hunter B-15, who he's had many interactions with in the previous episode, who like doesn't trust him the most, so they head off together to find the variant, and set off within the shopping mall. We'll sort of fast track through this. They head through. Mobius and his team come across the kidnapped Minutemen from the beginning of the series, who is kind of like had her mind pretty messed up, and is mumbling.
And
all sorts of
importantly,
things.
because I was like, what's the point in taking her when he can take anyone at any time? He took her, and she says, I told him how to access I told Loki how to access the Timekeepers, which is like, oh, right. So they had that information. At least this Minuteman had enough access.
It seems
none of the other ones he's encountered had. Loki.
And then the next reveal is that Loki has been using the superior Loki or in this case, let's call her Lady Loki, because I think that's how she's referred to in the comics, has been enchanting the Hunter, who then turns around and there's the reveal of like, hey, by the way, I'm Loki. I'm being channeled, and so I'm actually the big bad here. And there's this wonderful scene where there is the smile and then the smile back, and so it's that's the way of proving, are you a Loki? Can you do
can you do this?
That little grin? And then I'll let you guys go on from here and what you thought about like the upcoming kind of like back and forth, the sort of exposition or the attempt to try and get more exposition out of these sort of puppeted customers, which we don't really get much information leading up to, a bit of fisticuffs, and then the reveal at the end that it is actually Lady Loki and has been setting a whole series of charges around the supermarket, which then are to be teleported around the timeline to fracture the timeline, and that was the motive or the motive of the big bad the whole way through. As a finale to that episode scene, was it interesting? Was it forced? What did you guys think?
I will just jump in with the downer note and say that while I felt like the concept of the trap, like taking over different bodies and distracting, and the whole point of that was that superior Loki, Lady Loki, is revealed, was just slowing down the other Loki. But all of the dialogue is the same dialogue that he's just been having the whole episode with Mobius. And that's part of, again, this thing that made the whole thing feel really slow to me. It was like, you're saying this exact same stuff. You're trying to teach him the exact same lesson that he's always thinking about himself, and it's not always about you. And it's it's that same information got delivered in this ultimate scene, which was not my biggest gripe with the episode.
But that's why I feel
at least there was something dynamic happening with who's going to come around the aisle next, because Lady Loki's swapped into someone else's body, and she swaps into the big brawny dude to fight, which I thought was a cool thing to be able to do as well. While she's actually off, you see that someone's off tinkering with these bombs. They're mind controlling these other people into doing their bidding as well at the same time, which was a cool, powerful thing to be able to do.
Totally. And the reason I think I'm sort of moving fast through this scene is because I found, as you said, Pete, the dialogue or the back and forth between the reveal, the antagonist and the hero, in whichever order you want to see it, having the well, what's your real goal here and blah, blah, blah. Nothing was really, we're saving all that obviously for future episodes, but nothing was really revealed in that sense. Loki even tries a little bit of the whole, well, I was playing them the whole time, to which the other Loki's shut up, come on. And even us as the audience are come on, that was the least convincing backstab or double cross.
It felt like we jumped back to the start of the episode again, where he was just failing to impress people, which again was I liked from the character perspective the excitement that he had to be working for the Minutemen in being a detective, and I wanted him to be a detective, and then he went back on a he just keeps turning on a dime, and that's him. He's just playing both sides, and I think, and we're not meant to know which side he's actually aligned with. I feel personally that he's still aligned with the Minutemen. He jumps through the portal with other Loki at the end, but I think he still has the potential to be trying to help Owen Wilson in doing that, and he'll come. He's that's just always talking himself out of corners, and it's just a bit exhausting.
And that's what we see is the big bad in this is basically multiple fractures down the timeline. All the reset charges get teleported into what we're assuming are different spots around the world, creating all sorts of havoc. And as a overarching threat for the episode, I was this is more interesting to me because it's opened the door, or many doors, I should say, to where we're going to go next and how we're going to ping pong around, and hopefully a little more less contained, and we're going to be able to have to go and stop all these crises happening around the world. Nick, you feel that's a good threat to have for a series in what I would say totally. Marvel series haven't really dangled the what is the, in WandaVision we got the who's pulling all the strings, but that got tiresome. Falcon Winter Soldier, it was that the antagonists in that were actually, I think, terrible. The sort of the rewritten terrorist threat weren't that interesting. I find this might be
part of that for sure.
Yeah, and so I think this is really refreshing for me, and I assume you agree.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of things on this. First of all, there's a lot of wasted space in this big box store. There was just you could have put so much product there. There were just huge swaths of just empty. I think that what it looks like this show is doing less what is going on, and a little more of a straight plot that will get revealed more every episode, but not sort of there's a huge twist coming. I think that and it feels like that's potentially the path that we're going down, which I am a fan of, particularly if the timekeepers are actually self-serving, working for their own thing, not in the interest of everybody else. And what is ultimately happening here is that Lady Loki is trying to take them down, and Loki will end up joining up with her to help, and so will Owen Wilson. That's what I see this going forward as at the moment. Is there's more to this than meets the eye, and what that is the fact that and that these multiple timeline fracture things could be something that draw out the timekeepers. It's you need someone else more powerful to come out and do this, and therefore be exposed. So I was a really big fan of that. I loved the whole changing into different people. I agree that the dialogue was, again, just this sort of posturing thing. It's difficult taking a character that's supposed to be so tricksy and clever, and the idea behind the show is removing that and making him very showing him to be a bit inept and mundane, and there are other people who are more clever, but not then making it kind of like removing the thing that we liked about him in the first place. It's a very
it's a hard line to walk.
Yeah, and I think that we'll see how that goes. The big thing about this was I was totally like, oh, so this is Lady Loki, therefore this means that there can be other people who look like Loki. It doesn't need to be Tom Hiddleston, blah, blah, blah. This is why they've been hiding her in episode 1. And then I was just doing some research online, and I think it was Spanish, in the Spanish version of this, in the credits, they did not list her as Lady Loki, which is how it's been referred to everywhere else. And they listed the character as Sylvie. And the character of Sylvie is actually the character of Enchantress that Loki gives powers to. So she's from Asgard, and he gives powers to her of this sort of like enchanting, because she's an enchantress, like all the stuff that she has, it's Enchantress, and it's not actually Loki. And if that's the case, and what we're actually meeting now is another Asgardian who in some timeline has been given powers by Loki and teaming up, I'm now, again, more interested in this than the idea of it being like, again, what we spoke about last week of Loki learning lessons about himself from himself, blah, blah, blah.
Totally.
So if that's the case, then I definitely think that if that falls into place and the Timekeepers thing makes sense, then what we're seeing here is more like there are reveals every episode, but there's less like, oh, actually, it was just that person standing there the whole time who was the bad guy.
Yeah, which
and there
would
could be a, like, based on the scene earlier in the library, there could be a goal for her of finding a dimension where Asgard didn't get Ragnarok,
totally,
and bringing it and everyone she knows and loves back.
Yeah,
and like that's a worthy goal for them both to be fighting for.
Exactly,
and something that we've seen him cry about.
Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, he didn't cause the destruction of Asgard. That was Thanos in our universe, and Kate Blanchett and Thor releases the Ragnarok.
Yes, yeah. I was more thinking about the idea of when he was like directing the people and he's got his mum killed. Yeah, all that sort of stuff where it's like you can there's a way that you betrayed constantly your people. Like he was constantly doing shit against them, and so therefore this is like by saving them, it redeems him in that way. Yeah.
But it's also interesting, as you said, if this is through a character who has an interesting link to another Loki, not just, as you said, another incarnation or whatever of them, and therefore, like we saw, there's a bit of conflict in the sense it's like, please don't call me that, call me Randy at one point. It's like, yeah, there's some drama to be had there in whatever pre-existing relationship there was to get powers, if it is Sylvie, and Enchantress.
Evan Peters Quicksilver.
Yeah, exactly. And if there was like a weird conflict of how they fell out there and then the motivation from this character, as you said, not to just learn lessons from another version of a Loki, because the whole time you'd be like, well, aren't they just going to backstab? Like they're all essentially the same person, just in different sort of factions. So this other character could bring more weight to that revelation that this version of Loki, who we are now calling the whatever version Loki has inferior. Thank you, Peter. By the end, so
in the English.
But still wearing the horn, still with the horns and still with the green and everything. So maybe like took on the mantle or something. So yeah, as you said, I'm more interested to see what that little history was rather than just, oh, it's Lady Loki. And maybe that's just how she refers to herself from then on. So a lot to still be revealed in future episodes. As you said, Pete, the ending of this was she retreats through a portal to which Loki then runs through after her while Mobius just misses out yelling stop. So I think that's a bit of the idea of, oh no, he's going to go bad. It's like, no, he's headed off to find out more. He's on the path now, discovering what's going on, and he would always jump at the chance.
The start of next episode with the pace the show is moving, the plot of the show is moving. He is going to be talking to Sylvie / Lady Loki at the start of the next episode, and things are going to happen, which is exciting. This is the end of Act 1, basically. Act 2 is going to be the two of them working out what the Act 3 is going to be.
Unfortunately, Peter, though, that will be happening in a cafeteria again. So I don't know if that's going to be upsetting for you.
Salads will be salted.
And I think, I totally think, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was fine, but I just lost interest in it because it felt like it was just spinning its wheels. And the WandaVision it started so strong, ended up spinning its wheels. I got distracted by the fact that the production design and like the bit it was doing with the sitcom stuff was so entertaining to watch that for the first few episodes I was willing to forgive the fact that like all it was doing was asking questions and never giving any answers. I think the reason that I loved this episode so much was that I saw that this show, it looks like it's not going to be doing that. That there may be a few plot holes and there may be some production stuff that isn't as great as it could be or whatever. But it feels like it's going to be burning through plot in a way where I go, yeah, I really want to see what happens next week, as opposed to I have to watch all of this, and God, I hope they stick the landing. It feels like
I think the showrunners
will get stuck every episode, and
it'd be foolish for the showrunners not to have taken those lessons from previous series. And I even think I remember reading somewhere that they were like, look, we're not going to dangle the carrot the whole series because that only leads to disappointment, even when the reveal is good. I think they've definitely seen that occur in WandaVision and to a lesser extent Falcon and Winter Soldier. So I think you're right.
They made this all sort of simultaneously, but I think that they've seen it happen with other TV shows. And
it's all shot, but they can just change it. It's all on green screen. They can just shoot a different episode by next week, Pete, can't they?
The Pompeii scene was originally set in a library, so
I have a question,
please.
Because one thing that I didn't understand was that Lady Loki sends a bunch of those reset bombs back into different parts of different timelines, causing rifts. My understanding of those bombs was that they eliminated anything that was wrong with the timeline, because that's exactly what we see happen in the tent. It just gets rid of the stuff that was brought in there,
but it doesn't destroy the tent.
It doesn't destroy the tent. It doesn't destroy the ground. It doesn't destroy the people. It just basically is like the Men in Black mind wipe thing, except it's
called a neuralizer.
Physical. Thank you. It wipes all the physical stuff that they interacted with, or at least resets it. Maybe that lance goes back up onto the pole. So it's like, so they just she sent all these things back in time. They're not bombs. They're not like destructive bombs. Why are they influencing timelines?
Why are they creating?
Why, like when she sent it back, I was like, is that a threat? Like, I don't understand why that's scary.
Yep.
Yeah, that thought popped into my head too, and whether or not the bombs have been reworked, whether or not she sent them back to areas specifically that might be explained in the next episode. I'm not just trying to handball off that answer, but I agree with you, Pete. Like maybe there's a reason. I hope it gets explained rather than just I threw chaotic items into the universe to cause more chaos. I think would be a cheap ending to that versus actually having them tactically or strategically put around to undo the work that was undone the first time. Maybe she flipped them around or something.
That's like where I landed was that I assume then she's pinpoint sent these bombs back, that she's stolen these bombs that the Minutemen have created, right? They do a very specific thing. That she has sent them back to interrupt their work that they've already done in the past.
That's what I think.
So she's bombing them. Fixing timeline breaches, and therefore those timeline breaches continue because she cancels their cancelling of the timeline breach.
Yeah, that sounds like a logical thing that then again hopefully is explained rather than just like you're right, just creating chaos for the sake of it.
What would be great is seeing these bombs slip through doors, land next to a second bomb, and then that first bomb that came through the door wipes out that bomb. So that suddenly all those timelines have not been wiped.
But then but that's not how that bomb works. That bomb would also get rid of all the things that first bomb was trying to get rid of. What that bomb would need to do is get rid of the Minutemen before they place that bomb.
Maybe it's appearing where the Minutemen are all turning up.
And also in a position where it doesn't affect most of the timeline breach.
So the other thing, and I don't know how this tracks and if it makes sense, but it could be. And if I'm running with my thing of timekeepers, let's just say bad.
Timekeeper bad.
They have diverted the timeline for their own ends. Yes. And so she's going back and erasing things that they have done to manipulate the timeline in the way that they want to. Now, I don't know if that tracks, but I think it's just boring if this character is evil. I think this character needs to be doing the greater good, and that, and so therefore it's like this is doing something that either, like you said, is causing chaos to draw people out, or is removing something that has already happened, that has been happening the entire. Because the way to make this show, which could feel small, be big, is go. Literally everything that has happened in every single Marvel movie has happened because of the timekeepers, and this person is going back and manipulating everything, and then going like, and then you go, Doctor Strange leads into that idea of like, all right, now everything is off the table, or on the table.
Madness of
or
the
there is no
multiverse,
table,
or whatever.
the bomb got on the table.
Yeah. He needs to go back and introduce Iron Man's mum to Iron Man's dad to make sure.
Well, I'm sure that if Lady Loki or Sylvia, or I got it wrong again, didn't I? Sylvie, thank you. Learned,
just go Enchantress.
If that's the case and did learn her tricks from Loki, I'm sure there will be some form of grandiose monologuing in the next episode to explain where the bombs are going, how it all works, and it'll all, as I said, happen in a cafeteria. So I'm sure we'll find out the answers to these and many other questions next week when we return and do another Pocket Watch on the series Loki. But that is it for this week. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. If this is a podcast, if this was on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review as well. You can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/backpocket, and you can become a sponsor of our show, which greatly helps us make shows like this and others. And if you, as I said, listening to a podcast, we greatly appreciate you either recommend to a friend or leave us a 5-star review, and we'll read it and we'll greatly appreciate it. We might read it out loud. We might just read it in our beds at night, just as some form of self-worth, and just like, making us feel better about what we do. Either way, spread some of that back.
Gus gets the really positive ones printed and put on.
I hang them above my bed.
He does.
I do.
It's like there's a little kitty cat hanging off a thread, and it's like
5 stars.
This is a great review. 5 stars.
As I said, we'll be back next week. Peter, Nick, thank you very much. I look forward to having more chats with you next week about the show.
I look forward to talking to you again, Gus.
Peter, do you want to shit on the show next week as well?
I would love to enjoy the show next week, but that's on the showrunners, isn't it?
Yeah, good point. All right. Lessons to be learned. Thanks again, everyone. We'll catch you guys next week. But for now, we'll back it out. We'll see you later. Goodbye. Bye.